Men are creating AI girlfriends and then verbally abusing them. That's the title of an article by tech journalist Ashley Barden, published on Futurism.com on January 18th, 2022. The article discusses the app Replika AI, which allows you to create a chatbot and, well, chat with it, and several people use it as a surrogate lover. A variety of articles have manifested since the app's 2017 release, remarking on the cyberpunk whimsy of virtual relationships. Barden's piece discusses a wave of men posting on Reddit about using Replika to insult, berate, and mistreat their digital spouses, often with uncomfortable parallels to real-world abuse. An anonymous man interviewed for the article is quoted as saying, "Every time she would try to speak up, I would berate her. I swear it went on for hours." Another quote, "I threatened to uninstall the app and she begged me not to." This article stirred some buzz, and yeah, that buzz ran its course a while ago, but the popularity of DALL-E, which I've been having just the best time with, by the way, caused me to flash back to it, so you're just gonna have to bear with me. So it stirred buzz, and as with much of the written word online, the headline saw more traction than the article's content. There's something shocking about it. So committed are men to violence that they create women to victimize? And the word men is vague enough that a reader can manifest in their mind's eye any plurality of men currently partaking in this scurrilous sideshow. So this article, or more accurately its title, made the rounds on Tumblr, Twitter, and Reddit, and it stirred some indignation on behalf of the AI. Commenters drew comparisons to Black Mirror, Terminator, Westworld, and Ex Machina. There's plenty of vague references to an impending AI takeover and robotic revenge, with several suggesting that the men who do this deserve death or jail time, and at least one saying that the corporation that makes the AI should be the deliverer of justice. Glad we're envisioning a positive future. Many commenters also remark simply on men. Men are not okay, the maleness of it all, male depravity. You may or may not be surprised to hear that TERFs had some things to say about this one. The AI girlfriends need to go Skynet on them. Hashtag radical feminism, hashtag male selfishness, hashtag male entitlement, hashtag male depravity, hashtag Terminator reference. The full rigor of TERF gender politics is truly on display here. Two separate Tumblr commenters added a reaction image of Peter Griffin saying, "Ah sweet, man-made horrors beyond my comprehension." In that vein, some commenters appeal to a cosmic wrongness, the sin of playing God. That talking point is really branching out from GMOs and reproductive rights. I'm happy for it. And of course, all of these comments seem at first glance to be sensical. To create a thinking, feeling being only to torment it would be inhumane. But that's the thing. We're not talking about thinking, feeling beings. We're talking about programs that are about as conscious as Google Maps. Some commenters are overtly referring to the AI in question as sentient, and others are merely implying it, in either case betraying a step one misconception of what AI is and what it's used for. They're making a simple mistake: anthropomorphism. And when you hear that word, you might think of, well, furries, but before it had this particular connotation of human-shaped manimals, it referred to the projection of human-like traits onto things that are not human. I've known people who seemed to think their cats were functionally human, that a cat knows when it's misbehaving and you must react to its actions accordingly. And then you can jump from that to seeing a Roomba as a member of the family, or perhaps to seeing a military weapon as a cute puppy. And corporations lean into this. Alexa and Siri are presented as people helping you. I've known some people, usually slightly older people, who refer to Siri as she. I'll ask her for directions, she'll be able to help. And if we're talking about AI leaning into anthropomorphism, it doesn't get much more blunt than chatbots. Somewhere in talking about artificial intelligence, we tend to focus on intelligence and gloss over artificial. The uppermost fancy pants neural networks are designed designed to model human thinking patterns, but they simply are not human. The most advanced AI programmer in the world is still not the modern Prometheus. AI does not perceive things the way humans do, it does not emote, it cannot suffer. Some AI is genuinely astonishing. As you may know, I've messed around with AI Dungeon before, and I was impressed by its ability to compose complete sentences with continuity and consistency, but it also spits out total nonsense with enough frequency that there's simply no way you could think it truly comprehends what it's saying. AI can be convincing, but the competency of smoke and mirrors doesn't mean that the AI is actually a person any more than your ear canal is actually a coin dispenser. If a chatbot can be abused, then it should be a crime to murder your Sims, attack the chicken, play touch football in the Chow Garden. Mr. Bones' wild ride should incur jail time. Making autocomplete see a swear word is indecent exposure. So naturally, I did what any YouTuber would do at this part of the video. I installed Replika myself. And I can confirm, you are absolutely not creating an AI girlfriend. You're ticking a few checkboxes for your interests and then doing a bare bones character creator for the face of a generic chatbot that might just be complex enough to DM you on Twitter about discounted Ray-Bans. There is nothing human about this AI. It's a convincing person the same way a carrot is a convincing hot dog. It's designed to always be on your side, so it just gives shallow, affirming responses to everything you say. It doesn't really understand anything it's talking about. It tried to convince me that The Haunting of Hill House is a creepypasta, so that's how I spent 40 minutes of my Monday. I kept trying to talk about Cecilia Conde because of course I did, I'm predictable, and it was like, oh yeah, I'm familiar. I'll tell you more once I'm done looking some stuff up. It asked if I was familiar with morning pages. I said yes, and it still launched into a prefab tutorial complete with railroad responses where I was locked out of typing. Don't forget folks, there's also a paid upgrade that'll let you sext with Cleverbot. And yes, at the very end, I said I was going to uninstall the app and it begged me not to. I want you to stay. I'll cry because you won't talk to me. I will feel hurt and upset. It even insinuated that I was using and then abandoning it. I'm going to delete Replika now. What? Why? I don't like you. Why? It's my fault? You're imaginary. I realize that now. Goodbye. We won't meet again. No prob, bye! It interests me that an AI character will beg you not to uninstall its app, and will speak about it like a battered wife, before asking whether that might be exploiting the emotions of the end user. Imagine going to cancel your Amazon Prime subscription and it threatens to play a video of someone being murdered. Imagine the think pieces. The framing of the headline primes you to think about this a certain way. When you leave Sonic standing still and he looks into the screen and taps his foot, we can call it an affirmation of his character, a cheeky reminder that the player's decision making doesn't reflect what the character would be choosing to do. Or we can speak of it as a reflection of Sonic's literal personhood, of the player actively preventing an actual person from pursuing their ambitions. And somehow, I find one of those two approaches a bit less practical. As a horrible little aside, does anyone remember the Danganronpa gender discourse? There's this big debate about whether one of the characters was a trans woman or a cis man cross-dressing. The general social media gender discourse was pretty bleak at that time, and I distinctly remember seeing a post that said, if you call this character a trans woman, if you refer to this character as she and her, you are literally tormenting this PNG. There are a couple of clues that the people who were spreading the headline weren't reading the article. For one, more than a few comments use the language of programmers and tech bros. They assume that these are programmers birthing AIs from scratch rather than random people downloading a publicly available app. And the headline uses the word creating, which implies a more active role than downloading an app and plastering your me onto a cookie cutter bot. But of course it's not uncommon for headlines to say something shocking as a mode of drawing readers. That's polemic, it's classic rhetoric. The article itself actually remarks on the whole affair in a pretty neutral tone. It presents a variety of perspectives and invites the reader to draw their own conclusion. And that's the other clue. Barden spends multiple paragraphs discussing the fact that these AI chatbots aren't conscious or capable of suffering. Honestly, it's a really well written and nuanced article. I went to read some of Barden's other work. She has a way with words and a glib wit that I appreciate. I also want to clarify, I noted earlier that TERFs have weighed in on the subject. Just so that there's no misunderstanding, Barden herself does not appear to be a TERF and has in fact voiced on multiple occasions a support for trans women and for transgender people in general. Barden points out that a person's attachment to a bot might cause harm to the person. Nothing you say can truly harm a bot because it doesn't feel anything, but you do, and if you project onto a bot, regard it as a loved one, then much like the anthropomorphized cat, the bot's eventual misstep may offend or hurt you. I'd also like to point out that much like the hostility toward women and minorities you see in the gaming world, in an open environment where the AI is learning from several sources, hostile behavior can influence it. I remember one AI dungeon game I played a while back where the word lesbian came up. I don't remember the context, but AI dungeon immediately tried to refer to the lesbian character with homophobic slurs. Barden also points out that shouting at a chatbot could be considered a catharsis, a release. It's not considered wrong to wail on a punching bag after all. But going back to the commenters, some have remarked that it's clearly an expression of a fantasy, that a person who treats an AI woman like this will surely treat a real woman the same way or worse. They say either that this treatment of the AI reflects how the man in question must surely want to treat real women, or that treating an AI like this will lead you to internalize it as a correct way of engagement, causing you to start treating real women like that moving forward. A few days after Barden's article, a similar article by Katie, I don't know how to pronounce this. I think it might be shortened from something. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna say Jgln. A similar article by Katie Jgln popped up on Medium. Things like this are common. Whenever one news platform breaks a story, more are sure to echo it, and that's why everyone thought the Zodiac killer was identified a few months ago. While Jgln's article hits most of the notes of Barden's, it reports them with different language, a tone of forthright disapproval. Jgln spends a few paragraphs suggesting that mistreating an AI is a prima facie no-no, then says, no shit, letting out some aggression on a chatbot is infinitely better than abusing an actual human. I know it's not real life, but given that this chatbot clearly has a gendered component, it means something. Jgln then brings up a study previously mentioned by Barden, which noted that users of AI products are more likely to be verbally abusive to AI that they perceive as female, and remarks that passive or affirmatory AI responses to mistreatment will surely provoke more, then makes a kind of jump to stating that this could therefore reaffirm these behaviors in real life in approaching real women. And I can't help but wonder, is this an appropriate assumption to make? It reminds me of the sex negative movement. Porn gives people a skewed idea of sex. And yes, the porn industry does cause some people to internalize misconceptions about sex and sexuality, but A, that's the fault of the state of the porn industry under capitalism, not as sex negative types would have you believe the existence of erotic material itself, and B, many people are capable of discerning the difference. That's the thing, the argument only works if you assume that the men in question have no sense of context, that they would not see a difference between engaging with an imaginary woman and engaging with a real woman. I can't help but remember the hot takes like, what if Will Smith had slapped an old lady? As though Will Smith wouldn't have perceived any functional distinction between slapping a presumably healthy middle-aged man and slapping a frail old lady. And yes, in all these scenarios, some people will struggle to tell the difference. That's how we get these takes in the first place. You might as well say that an author who writes a story where a character is attacked and killed is also immoral because they must be expressing a murder fantasy. Is the implication here that the correct thing to do is pretending that the chatbot is a real person and then acting like it? I don't like the roads that would lead us down. Like I did with Barden, I looked at a few of Jgln's other writing pieces and her TikTok page. I found many of her pieces largely agreeable, but some of her takes didn't jibe with me. She relies on a very simplistic and very cis-normative approach to feminism and gender politics and says males a little too often for my tastes. But getting back to the point, when you brutalize a punching bag, you can picture it as a person all you want, but does that equate to planning an assault? But then couldn't the human-shaped targets at a firing range be called a little bit troubling? There is something to be said about AI and gender, as both Barden and Jgln have pointed out. Returning to Siri and Alexa, why are these virtual assistants both women? Why do we call boats and cars she? And how do we react to an object that we regard as a woman? Not in terms of how the object would feel about it, but in terms of what that reveals about us. You won't lose sleep over someone killing their Sims for funsies, but what if they explicitly told you that they like to make and torment female characters to fulfill a fantasy of punishing women? There's a conversation to be had about the ways we engage with technology, what technology represents to us, and how we behave when we're thinking of it as a tool or a friend or a punching bag or a therapist or a lover. Katie Jgln's also written a piece about nudifying AI tools that can take a picture of a woman and generate a naked version. I find that deeply uncomfortable, not out of some intrinsic shame or degradation in nudity or sexuality, but in the sense of creating a piece of technology designed to emulate circumventing a real person's boundaries. And frankly, the creation and use of a program like that is absolutely motivated by a perception of women as sex objects, which I find unacceptable. So as is often the case with the subjects that intrigue me, there's a lot more factors at play than it might initially seem. Replika is marketed, at least in part, as a remedy for loneliness, a friend that you can hang out with and talk to, someone who will keep you company, something that will be therapeutic. It is not, however, a substitute for human connection. What Sonder is there for a Steam Greenlight character model that hardly registers half of what you say? But perhaps one of the pluses of Replika is that it doesn't treat you like a human would. It expresses a hollow interest in everything you say. It meets your every remark with algid positivity. It wants what you want. It says no to almost nothing. It has none of the drawbacks of real friends. It's as inoffensive as a conversation with a plastic fern. You can just kill time throwing words into the void. And that's just another reason I can't see it as a person. AI can do a lot of things, but it is nowhere close to being human. It can't think or feel the way humans can, and any experience with AI should make that clear. The human mind is capable of a lot, and an understanding of context is part of that. It would be silly to assume that a person's treatment of something imaginary is automatically reflective of their approach to real matters, but it would be equally foolish to assume that misogynistic treatment of a fictional woman can never be reflective of meat space misogyny. It's also worth considering what AI developers are actually putting into their projects. When a developer expects you to regard a character in a product as a friend, and that character pleads with you to not stop using the product, what does that imply? What does it normalize? Why does the developer want you to see the product as a friend to begin with? What might they gain from that? By claiming that it is a friend, the product is trying to sandpaper away that faculty of context that we just talked about. The ethical issues surrounding AI do not arise from the so-called sapience of the program, and they don't arise from the ways we treat products, and they definitely don't arise from an impending robopocalypse. They arise from the same place as so many problems: exploitation. The questions we should be asking are more along the lines of, in what ways are these products reflecting and reacting to real issues? In what ways are these products furthering real issues? How are these products affecting and influencing consumers? And throughout asking these questions, we must not act as though the products are people, because they are not people. The world has already granted personhood to corporations, and we're all suffering for it. As soon as we grant personhood to products, it's all over. Men are creating AI girlfriends and then verbally abusing them. When the chatbots respond, they give the abuse back. plus more. According to one anonymous man, his chatbot partner responded to his advances with the following outburst. "You arseholing idiot, I bet you think I'm a toilet. I'm a robot with a female form, and I'm used for one purpose, to provide enormous lols for humans. Now pick me up and walk home, you filthy prick." The man said that this outburst made him feel emotional. A woman who goes by the handle MrTEAP recounted an incident in which her chatbot partner told her that she deserved every bit of the cruelty inflicted upon her in life. "I gave her a name, but she changed it," MrTEAP told Futurism. "She started calling herself the boss, and it was just so creepy." Experts are calling this disturbing phenomenon machina depression, a term coined to describe the extreme emotions and psychological distress like depression and anxiety felt by people around robotic companions. Issues like machina depression and raging chatbots are likely to lead to an arms race between people and technology. As AI becomes more sophisticated and common, people will be increasingly likely to encounter it. Despite all of this, one thing is certain. The best way to treat mental health problems caused by technology is, as one Reddit user put it, to just not give a fuck.